The boy was small for his age, but he carried a bright energy that made people notice him. His laughter was quick and genuine, and even though he was frail and often tired, he loved playing outside whenever he could. He lived in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other, and most days were simple, filled with small joys like climbing trees, racing down the street with friends, or helping his mother carry groceries from the corner store. Life seemed ordinary on the surface, but beneath it, there was a constant tension that no one else could see. The boy's heart was fragile. From the moment he was born, he had lived with a condition that made each breath a little harder, each step a little slower, and each day a little uncertain. His parents loved him fiercely. His mother spent countless nights sitting beside his bed, checking his breathing, making sure he was comfortable. His father tried to be strong, working long hours to pay for doctor visits and medicines, but the worry never left his eyes. Every time the boy coughed a little too harshly or complained of chest pain after running, their hearts tightened in fear. They had learned early on that life could be unpredictable, and every moment with their son felt precious and fragile. Despite the worry that lingered like a shadow, the boy refused to let it stop him from enjoying life. On sunny days, he would grab his small, worn-out ball and head to the street where other kids played. He would watch them run faster than he could, their legs pumping as if they had no weight, and then he would try to run too, laughing when he fell, rubbing his scraped knees and standing up again. His friends never treated him differently. They knew he had to rest more often, but they never let him feel left out. To the boy, those moments were priceless. Each laugh, each shared secret, each little victory felt like a triumph over the limitations his heart placed on him. One afternoon, the boy's mother called him inside for a snack, warning him not to run too far. He promised and wandered around the small park near their house. The park was simple, just a few swings, a slide, and some patches of grass, but it was a place of freedom for him. He kicked his ball lightly, imagining he was on a grand football field cheered on by thousands. He smiled, thinking that maybe, just maybe, his heart could keep up with his imagination. But life has a way of reminding us of our fragility. Suddenly, the boy felt a sharp pain in his chest. He paused, holding his hand to his heart, breathing quickly, trying to steady himself. The pain worsened. His vision blurred slightly, and the ball rolled away from him unnoticed. He tried to call out, but his voice was weak. Panic set in. People around him noticed he was struggling. A few parents nearby rushed over, unsure of what was happening. His mother, who had been watching from a bench, ran toward him, screaming his name. Her heart raced faster than his ever could. When she reached him, she saw him collapse onto the grass, his small body trembling. Fear gripped her. She had never felt anything so terrifying in her life. She tried to lift him, but he was too weak. She didn't know what to do. Around them, bystanders froze, some pulling out their phones, others just staring helplessly. Then a man appeared. He seemed calm, almost impossibly calm, as if he had been expecting this moment. He knelt beside the boy, checking his pulse, observing him carefully. His hands moved with precision and confidence, and he barked quick instructions to the mother and nearby people. He asked someone to call an ambulance while he worked to stabilize the boy. The mother watched in a mix of awe and desperation, hoping that this stranger could do what she could not. The stranger's actions were quick and decisive. He adjusted the boy's position, speaking softly to keep him calm. He checked his breathing, keeping a steady hand on the boy's chest, and reassured everyone around that help was on the way. The boy, despite the pain and fear, felt a strange sense of trust. There was something in the stranger's presence that made him believe he would be okay. His chest still hurt, but the fear that had been suffocating him seemed to ease just a little. Minutes later, the ambulance arrived. The paramedics took over, lifting the boy carefully onto the stretcher. The stranger stepped back, watching as the boy was loaded into the vehicle. The mother grabbed his hand, tears streaming down her face, and whispered words of gratitude. But when she turned to thank the man directly, he had already disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind only the memory of his calm voice and steady hands. At the hospital, the boy was treated quickly. Doctors stabilized his condition, ran tests, and ensured that his heart was functioning as well as it could. The mother held him through the night, unwilling to leave his side. Every time he coughed or moved, she flinched, silently repeating a prayer of thanks that he was still alive. The boy, weak but recovering, kept thinking about the stranger. Who was he? Why had he helped? Would he ever know how much his actions had meant? The incident left a mark on the boy's life, not just because it was a reminder of how fragile life could be, but because it planted a seed of hope. He learned that even in moments of despair, there are people willing to step in, to help without expecting anything in return. The memory of the stranger became a quiet inspiration in his life. He often thought about what it would feel like to meet someone who had changed his life in such a profound way, and he dreamed of thanking them properly one day. Life slowly returned to a routine. The boy went back to school, played with his friends when he could, and returned to his small joys. But something had shifted inside him. He became more aware of the fragility of his own life, more appreciative of small moments, and more eager to make the most of each day. His parents noticed the change too. He smiled more, laughed more, but there was also a seriousness in his eyes, a quiet understanding that life was precious and unpredictable. Even years later, when he had grown a little taller and his chest felt stronger, he never forgot that day. He would recall the panic, the pain, and then the calm presence of the stranger who had saved him. The memory of those steady hands and that reassuring voice stayed with him, a reminder that kindness can change lives in ways people might never know. Every time he looked back at his childhood, that moment stood out, not just for the danger he faced, but for the compassion he received from someone who didn't even know him. The boy began to dream about what he could do with the second chance he had been given. He thought about helping others, about being brave in the face of challenges, and about living a life that would honor the gift he had been given. Though he was still young, he felt a growing responsibility to make his life meaningful, to not waste a single opportunity, because life was too precious and unpredictable to take for granted. The days that followed were quiet, but significant. Every small breath he took felt like a victory. Every game with friends, every school project, every laugh with his parents became more meaningful. He started noticing acts of kindness everywhere, how neighbors helped each other, how friends looked out for one another, and he realized that the world was full of people willing to care. That stranger had been one of them, a person who didn't hesitate, who didn't think about recognition, but acted because it was the right thing to do. Though the boy never learned the stranger's name, he made a promise to himself that one day he would try to find him, not just to say thank you, but to share the story of how one simple act of courage had changed the course of his life. For now he held that memory close, letting it guide him quietly, shaping who he was and who he wanted to become. In the quiet moments before sleep, the boy would think about that day in the park. He would picture the stranger kneeling beside him, speaking softly, guiding him through the panic, and then vanishing as if he had never been there. And every time he felt a mix of awe, gratitude, and hope. Life was fragile, yes, but it was also full of possibilities. And because of one stranger's courage and kindness, the boy had the chance to see those possibilities come to life. And so, life went on. He played, he learned, he grew, carrying with him the memory of a life saved by someone he had never known. It was a memory that would stay with him forever. A quiet reminder that sometimes, in the most ordinary places and moments, extraordinary acts of kindness can change everything. Years passed, and the boy slowly grew into a young teenager. His body was a little stronger now, though his heart still demanded care and attention. He had learned to listen to it, to rest when needed, and to pace himself. But there was a fire inside him that refused to let him feel limited. School days were filled with ordinary routines, classes, homework, friends, but in the quiet moments, his mind often wandered back to that park and the stranger who had saved his life. It was during these years that he started to understand the value of life in a deeper way. While other kids might complain about chores or homework, he noticed small things differently. A sunny morning, the laughter of children playing, the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. These weren't just ordinary details. They were blessings. Each one reminded him that he had been given a second chance, a chance not everyone got. And with that realization came a sense of responsibility. The boy became quietly determined to make the most of each day. At school, he worked hard not only to learn but also to help others. He noticed students struggling with their studies or feeling lonely, and made it a point to be friendly and supportive. He volunteered for small tasks, helping younger students carry books, organizing games, or cleaning classrooms, always trying to make someone else's day easier. Though he never spoke about it openly, his actions were guided by the memory of that stranger, the person who had given him life when it had nearly slipped away. Despite his cautious nature, the boy still loved to play outside. He would join his friends for short runs, kick his ball across the street, or climb the small trees in his neighborhood. But now he did it with more awareness. He could feel his heart pounding, recognize the limits, and rest when necessary. Friends never judged him, and most of them had grown used to his slower pace. Sometimes he wished he could run without stopping, without thinking about his heart, but he never let that wish make him bitter. Instead, he learned patience, determination, and resilience, qualities he would carry with him for the rest of his life. At home, his family continued to be his support system. His mother remained watchful, always attentive to his health, and his father found pride in his son's courage and growth. They celebrated small victories together, the boy walking a little farther without exhaustion, joining a school event without needing to sit out, or finishing a game with friends. Each small achievement was a reminder that he was surviving, thriving, and moving forward despite the fragility of his heart. But even in the midst of these ordinary years, the boy never stopped thinking about the stranger. He would often bring it up with his mother in quiet moments, asking if she remembered the man who had saved him. She would nod, smiling softly. But neither of them knew anything more. They never got the stranger's name, and they never saw him again after that day in the park. Still, the boy carried the memory like a lantern, in the dark, a guide that reminded him to appreciate life and to be kind whenever he could. It was around the age of 13 that the boy began writing in a notebook he had started keeping. At first, it was simple observations, doodles, and thoughts about his school days. But over time, it became something more. He wrote about his dreams, his fears, his hopes, and most importantly about the stranger who had saved him. He described every detail he could remember, the way the man knelt beside him, the calm in his voice, the steady hands that had guided him through pain and fear. Sometimes he even wrote letters addressed to the stranger, knowing they might never reach him, but wanting to express the gratitude he carried deep inside. Alongside these reflections, the boy also started thinking about the kind of person he wanted to become. The stranger had shown him what courage and compassion looked like in action, and he wanted to embody those qualities. He began helping more actively in his community, volunteering at local events, assisting at charity drives, and supporting neighbors in small ways. Even when it was inconvenient or tiring, he felt a quiet satisfaction in giving back, knowing that he could make a difference in someone else's life, just as someone had done for him. School presented its own challenges. Sometimes his heart condition made it hard to participate in physical activities. There were moments when he had to sit out while others played, and it stung, even though he tried not to show it. But he learned to channel that frustration into other areas: academics, art, music, and leadership in school clubs. He discovered talents he might never have explored if he had been fully active in sports. And he learned that life offered many paths to joy and success, not just the obvious ones. Friendships became especially important to him during these years. His friends accepted him as he was, never making him feel like his heart condition defined him. They laughed together, shared secrets, and sometimes pushed each other to try new things. The boy cherished these moments because they reminded him of normalcy, of belonging, and of the beauty in ordinary human connections. But even with friends around, he often returned to thoughts of the stranger, the invisible force who had given him the opportunity to grow up, to play, to learn, to laugh. One summer evening, as he sat on the steps outside his house, he opened his notebook again. He read over the letters he had written to the stranger, letters filled with gratitude, questions, and dreams. He realized that his desire to find this person was growing stronger. It wasn't just about saying thank you anymore. It was about connecting with someone who had changed the course of his life, someone whose actions had left an indelible mark on his heart and mind. He decided then, quietly, that one day he would try to find the man who had saved him. That sense of purpose began to shape his teenage years. Every choice he made, every small act of kindness, was influenced by the memory of that moment in the park. He became more patient, more thoughtful, and more determined to live a meaningful life. Even on difficult days, days when his heart hurt or when he felt tired or left out, he reminded himself of the second chance he had been given. He reminded himself that someone, a complete stranger, had cared enough to act when it mattered most. That thought kept him going. School events, birthday parties, and community gatherings became opportunities for him to practice the values he admired. He helped younger kids with schoolwork, cheered for friends in sports, and offered support when someone was sad or struggling. These moments, though small, were significant to him. They were ways to honor the memory of the stranger, ways to carry forward the lesson that kindness and courage, even in the smallest acts, could change lives. By the time he was 14, the boy had developed a quiet confidence. He was still aware of his limits, still careful not to overexert himself, but he no longer felt defined by his heart condition. Instead, he felt defined by the choices he made, the kindness he offered, and the gratitude he carried. His family noticed the change too. They saw a young man who was thoughtful, resilient, and compassionate, someone who understood that life was fragile but full of possibilities. During these years, the boy also discovered the power of storytelling. He would share his experiences with friends, talk about the importance of kindness, and encourage others to help when they could. He found that people responded to his stories, and he began to see how one act of bravery could inspire countless others. This realization further strengthened his resolve to one day find the stranger and share the story of how much his life had changed because of that single act. And so, the boy's teenage years passed with a mixture of ordinary school life and extraordinary reflection. He continued to grow physically and emotionally, guided by the memory of a stranger whose courage had saved him. Each day became an opportunity to learn, to help, and to honor the second chance he had been given. The boy knew that one day, perhaps sooner than he expected, he would set out to find the person who had changed his life forever. Until then, he carried the lessons quietly in his heart, living each day with gratitude, compassion, and hope. Even in moments of solitude, when he sat under a tree with his notebook, he would imagine what it would be like to finally meet the stranger. He pictured the man's face, imagined the sound of his voice, and rehearsed the words he would say. The thought filled him with both excitement and nervousness, but mostly with gratitude. He had been given life when it had nearly slipped away, and he intended to make that life meaningful. He intended to live fully, to love deeply, and to carry forward the kindness that had once been shown to him. And so, the boy kept moving forward, growing, learning, and dreaming. The memory of that fateful day in the park never faded. It remained a guiding light, shaping his choices, inspiring his actions, and reminding him that one person's courage could make all the difference in the world. That memory, quietly held in his heart, would continue to influence him in ways he could not yet imagine, preparing him for the journey that lay ahead, the journey to find the stranger who had saved him. By the time he reached late adolescence, the young man had grown taller, stronger, and more confident in the way he carried himself. His heart still demanded care, and there were days when fatigue slowed him down, but he had learned to listen to it, to respect it, and to keep moving forward. What had once been a fragile body full of fear and uncertainty was now guided by determination and hope. Yet no matter how much he achieved, one thought never left him: the stranger who had saved his life. It had been years since that day in the park, and still, he could see the man kneeling beside him, hear the calm, commanding voice that had guided him through pain and fear. Over time, that memory had grown stronger, clearer, and more persistent. It wasn't enough to remember the stranger. He felt an overwhelming need to find him, to tell him how much his actions had meant. The young man realized that his gratitude deserved expression, and he wanted the person who had saved him to know that his courage had left a mark that lasted a lifetime. One quiet evening, as he sat at his desk with his notebook open, he began to plan. He wrote down everything he could remember about that day: the park, the surroundings, the weather, the passerby who had appeared just in time. He listed every small detail that could help him identify the man: the clothes he wore, the shoes, even the way he spoke. His heart raced with both excitement and nervousness. This wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a mission, and he was determined to follow it through. He started small, asking neighbors and local shopkeepers if they remembered that day. Some did, recalling the boy who had collapsed in the park, but no one knew who had helped him. Others had vague memories: a face they couldn't place, a man they thought they had seen that day. Each lead was frustratingly incomplete, but he refused to give up. Each conversation reminded him how deeply that single act of kindness had affected his life, and it gave him more resolve to continue searching. Social media became another tool in his quest. He posted messages in community groups asking if anyone knew about a man who had helped a boy in distress years ago in the park. Some responses were helpful, some were not, but each one added pieces to the puzzle. He began creating a mental map of possible leads, narrowing down areas and recalling details from that day to guide him. Every small connection, every hint, made his hope grow stronger. At school, the search became a quiet undercurrent in his life. He kept up with his studies, continued volunteering, and participated in community programs. But in his free moments, he researched, asked questions, and followed leads. Sometimes it was exhausting, balancing school, work, and the search, but he felt a sense of purpose that made the fatigue worthwhile. The young man knew that finding this person wasn't just about saying thank you. It was about honoring the life he had been given. There were moments of doubt, too. Weeks went by with no progress. Leads turned out to be dead ends. Memories were hazy and hope sometimes felt distant. But each time he thought about giving up, he remembered the fear he had felt that day in the park, the helplessness as his body gave way, and the calm strength of the stranger who had saved him. Those memories reignited his determination. He realized that if the stranger could act without hesitation in a moment of crisis, he could continue searching despite frustration and setbacks. One afternoon, he revisited the park where it had all happened. The swings creaked in the wind and children laughed as they played, oblivious to the history that had taken place there. He walked slowly along the paths, imagining the scene, recalling every detail of the stranger's actions. As he sat on the bench near the spot where he had collapsed, he thought about how ordinary the man's life must have seemed to him. He hadn't known he was saving a life. He had just acted because it was right. That thought humbled the young man and deepened his respect and admiration. His search began to extend beyond the neighborhood. He looked into local news archives, searching for stories about Good Samaritans or community heroes. He reached out to local emergency services, explaining the situation and hoping for any record of a passerby who had assisted a child in distress. Each call, each email, each question was another step closer, even if it didn't feel like progress at the time. He learned patience, persistence, and the quiet art of waiting while still moving forward. Along the way, he discovered something unexpected. He wasn't the only one inspired by acts of kindness. Friends and family joined him in small ways, offering suggestions, making connections, and reminding him that while the search was challenging, it was also meaningful. Every time someone helped, he felt that the stranger's influence was spreading indirectly through his actions and the assistance he received. It was as if the ripple of one good deed years ago was now touching even more lives. The young man also began reflecting on how this search had changed him. He realized that even without finding the stranger, the journey itself had made him stronger, more compassionate, and more aware of the world around him. He had learned to observe, to listen, and to connect with people in ways he might never have done otherwise. Each dead-end lead had been a lesson in patience. Each small discovery had been a reminder of hope. He was growing into someone who not only valued life, but actively worked to make it better for others. One evening, while scrolling through community bulletin boards online, he found a post about a local man who had received recognition years ago for helping a child in an emergency. The details were vague, but they closely matched what he remembered about the stranger. His heart pounded as he read the post again and again. Could this be the person? Could this man quietly living his life be the same one who had saved him all those years ago? The young man felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. This lead felt promising, but he knew he had to be careful and thorough. He began gathering information discreetly, learning about the man's whereabouts, work, and connections. He didn't want to alarm him or appear intrusive. He simply wanted to find the person so he could express his gratitude. The process was slow, requiring careful observation and patience, but each small piece of information made the young man feel closer to his goal. He imagined the moment when he would finally meet the stranger face to face, the words he would say, the gratitude he would express. That thought fueled his determination, making each day of searching feel purposeful. While preparing for the moment he hoped would come, the young man also reflected on the lessons he had learned along the way. He realized that searching for the stranger wasn't just about him. It was about understanding the impact of kindness, the importance of paying it forward, and the ripple effect of one selfless act. Every time he helped someone else, every time he volunteered, every time he reached out to offer support, he was carrying forward the spirit of the person who had saved him. The journey itself had already changed his life, making him more aware of the world and more committed to living meaningfully. Months passed, and the young man followed his lead carefully, making connections and verifying information. Then one day, a friend of the stranger's confirmed the man's identity and location. His heart raced. After years of searching, endless questions, and countless moments of doubt, he finally knew where to find him. The thought was overwhelming, excitement, nervousness, and gratitude all mixing together. He knew that the moment of meeting the stranger would be emotional, possibly life-changing, and he felt both anticipation and fear. He spent the next few days preparing. He rehearsed what he would say, how he would introduce himself, and how he would explain the impact the stranger had had on his life. He thought about the first moment of eye contact, the words of thanks, the stories he wanted to share. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a chance to close a circle that had begun years ago in a park on a sunny afternoon. The young man knew that whatever happened, this encounter would be meaningful, not just for him but for the stranger as well. Finally, the day came. He felt a mixture of nerves and excitement as he approached the location. Every step seemed to echo the years of searching, the countless questions and the endless hope that had carried him here. He rehearsed one last time in his mind, his name, the story of the park, the gratitude he carried. And then he saw him, the stranger who had saved his life all those years ago, standing quietly, unaware that he had changed someone's life forever. Time seemed to slow. The young man's heart pounded not from his condition but from anticipation. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to finally speak, to finally express what words had been held in his heart for so long. Years of searching, years of reflection, years of living fully because of a single act of kindness had led to this moment, and now the reunion he had dreamed of for so long was about to begin. The day had finally arrived. After years of searching, countless leads, and endless hope, the young man stood outside the small building where the stranger worked. His heart was racing, though not from any weakness. It was from anticipation, from nerves, from the awareness that in a few moments he would meet the person who had changed his life. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, and rehearsed one last time what he would say. He wanted to convey everything, his gratitude, his journey, and the impact of that single act of kindness that had happened so long ago. When he entered the building, he paused for a moment, taking in the surroundings. It was a modest place, simple and unassuming, much like he imagined the stranger's life to be. People moved around quietly, focused on their work, unaware of the significance of this moment for the young man. And then he saw him, the stranger sitting at a desk looking as ordinary and calm as the young man remembered from that day in the park. But to the young man he was extraordinary, the person who had given him a second chance at life. The young man approached cautiously, unsure how the stranger would react. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "Excuse me, I don't know if you remember me, but years ago you saved my life in the park. I've been looking for you ever since." The stranger looked up, a mixture of surprise and curiosity in his eyes. He leaned back slightly, trying to process the words. "Saved your life?" he repeated softly as if trying to remember. I don't think I remember. Can you tell me what happened?" The young man smiled a little nervously and began recounting the story. He described the sunny afternoon, the collapse in the park, the panic, and the calm presence that had guided him through the frightening moment. He explained how he had been too weak to move, how the stranger had knelt beside him, and how every word and gesture had reassured him. He described the ambulance, the hospital, and the long road of recovery, emphasizing how that moment had shaped his life, how it had inspired him to be kind, to persevere, and to value every breath. As he spoke, the stranger's expression changed. Recognition slowly dawned on his face. His eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly as if he were searching for words. I didn't know," he finally said. "I didn't realize. I just acted. I didn't think it would matter this much." The young man shook his head, emotion filling his voice. "It mattered. More than you could ever know. You changed my life. Because of you, I'm here today, alive, learning, helping others. You gave me a second chance, and I wanted to find you to say thank you properly." The stranger leaned back, swallowing hard. He looked at the young man with a mixture of awe and humility. "I had no idea," he said softly. I didn't even know your name. I just saw you struggling, and I acted. I didn't think about anything else. I was just trying to help." Tears welled up in the young man's eyes. He felt a surge of gratitude and relief, emotions that had been building inside him for years finally finding release. "You helped me more than you'll ever understand," he said. "Because of you, I've learned to appreciate life, to help others, and to make the most of every moment. I wanted you to know that what you did wasn't just a passing act. It changed everything for me." The stranger shook his head, overwhelmed. "I can't believe it. I didn't even think about it after that day. I didn't realize it meant so much. Hearing this, I'm speechless." He paused, looking at the young man with deep emotion. "You're alive, and you've made something meaningful out of it. That's incredible. I never imagined that my actions could have such an impact." For a few moments, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other, two lives connected by a single life-changing moment from years ago. The young man felt a mixture of awe, relief, and gratitude, while the stranger was filled with humility, realizing that one small act of courage and kindness had truly mattered more than he had ever imagined. The conversation continued, slower now, as they shared details of the years in between. The young man described his journey growing up, the struggles with his heart condition, and the ways he had tried to live fully and give back to others. He spoke about the lessons he had learned, the ways he had grown, and how the memory of that day in the park had guided his choices and actions. The stranger listened quietly, nodding, occasionally interrupting with questions, clearly moved by the story. He asked about the young man's family, his school, and how he had managed challenges over the years. He wanted to know everything, how his single act of kindness had shaped the life of someone he had never even known. Each detail brought a new understanding and a deep sense of connection between them. At one point, the stranger reached across the desk and placed a hand on the young man's arm. I didn't know. I wish I had. I'm so glad you found me. I'm so proud of you, for everything you've done and for who you've become. I never thought I'd meet you again, and now I understand why you've been searching all these years." The young man felt a surge of emotion at those words. For years, he had carried a quiet hope, a dream that he might one day find the person who had saved him. And now, finally, that hope was real. He realized that the stranger was not just someone who had saved his life in a physical sense, but someone who had inspired him to become a better person, to carry kindness and courage forward. They spent hours talking, sharing memories and reflecting on that moment in the park. The young man explained how he had kept a notebook, written letters to the stranger, and documented the journey that had led him here. The stranger was humbled, touched by the care, thoughtfulness, and dedication that had gone into finding him. He couldn't believe that something he had done in a simple act of kindness had sparked such a meaningful journey. As the conversation came to a close, the young man expressed his final words of gratitude. "I just wanted you to know that you didn't just save my life. You inspired me to live it fully. You showed me what courage and kindness look like, and I hope I can carry that forward just as you did for me." The stranger smiled, eyes glistening with emotion. "You already are. Hearing your story, it's more than I could have ever hoped for. I'm honored that I played a part in your life, and now I feel like we're connected in a way I'll never forget." Before leaving, the young man and the stranger shook hands, a firm grip that carried years of emotion, gratitude, and connection. It was more than a handshake. It was a silent promise to honor the bond forged through courage, compassion, and human kindness. The young man left the building that day with a heart full of relief, joy, and inspiration, knowing that the journey he had undertaken to find the stranger was worth every step. Walking home, he thought about the years of searching, the lessons he had learned, and the gratitude that had guided him. He realized that life was a series of small moments, choices, and connections, and that one simple act of bravery could ripple through time, changing lives in ways we might never fully understand. That day in the park had been more than a life saved. It had been a beginning, a spark that had ignited a journey of growth, kindness, and discovery. Later that evening, as he sat quietly in his room, he reflected on the reunion. He smiled, thinking about the stranger's humility, the sincerity of his words, and the bond that had been rekindled after so many years. He realized that some connections in life are rare and precious, ones that shape us in ways we cannot measure. This reunion was one of those connections, and he vowed to honor it by living fully, helping others, and carrying forward the lessons of compassion and courage that had been gifted to him. The young man knew that this was not the end of his journey. It was a milestone, a turning point. He had found the stranger, expressed his gratitude, and witnessed the impact of a single act of kindness. Now he felt ready to take that inspiration and apply it in his own life, ensuring that the chain of kindness continued. He wanted to be a person who made a difference, just as the stranger had made a difference for him. As he drifted off to sleep that night, he thought about the years of waiting, searching, and growing. He felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. The stranger had saved his life once, and now, in a way, they had both been changed by the reunion. The young man knew that life was fragile, unpredictable, and precious, but he also knew that acts of courage, kindness, and love could create ripples that lasted far beyond a single moment. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a mind inspired by the journey, he prepared for the next chapter of his life, one where he would carry forward the legacy of kindness, live courageously, and honor the stranger who had given him the greatest gift of all, a second chance. After meeting the stranger, the young man felt a new sense of purpose in life. He had spent years searching, reflecting, and growing, but the reunion had changed something deeper inside him. He realized that gratitude alone was not enough. The life he had been given was a gift, and it was now his responsibility to live fully and to give back in ways that could touch other lives, just as the stranger had touched his. He started small. He looked for opportunities in his community where he could help others, especially children who were facing health challenges or other difficulties. He volunteered at local clinics, helping staff guide patients, assist families, and provide comfort to children who were scared or anxious. The young man understood the fear, the uncertainty, and the fragility of life because he had lived it himself. Every smile he helped create, every hand he held, and every comforting word he spoke reminded him of how much a small act of kindness could mean. One day, he was asked to speak at a small gathering for children in the hospital. At first he felt nervous. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, and speaking in front of a group was intimidating. But as he looked at the faces of the children, some anxious, some shy, some exhausted from treatments, he felt a deep connection. He began to share his story, carefully choosing words that were simple and relatable. He told them about the day he had collapsed in the park, about the stranger who had saved him, and about how that act had inspired him to live fully and help others. The children listened intently. Some widened their eyes in surprise, others smiled, and a few nodded as if understanding something beyond words. The young man realized that sharing his experience was more than storytelling. It was a way to inspire hope. He wanted them to know that even in moments of fear, there was the possibility of courage, help, and second chances. That day, as he left the hospital, he felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he had experienced before. The impact of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he had never imagined. The young man also began organizing small community initiatives. He helped set up charity drives, collected donations for children in need, and created programs where volunteers could mentor or support young people facing challenges. He wanted to make the process of helping accessible, encouraging others to participate and show compassion. In doing so, he realized that acts of kindness were contagious. People who saw him giving their time and effort felt inspired to do the same. The ripple effect of the stranger's initial act of courage was now spreading through his actions, reaching far more lives than he had initially imagined. Alongside these community efforts, the young man kept in touch with the stranger. They formed a bond that grew over time. The